I welcome you all for our next edition. It's very happy to welcome today's guest, practicing company secretary, Mr. Jayanth Viswanathan sir, who is also one of my inspiration into teaching. Uh, Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, to talk about your early stage of career, because you have a vast experience, nearly 15 years.
Yes,
So, at the early stage in your career, what were all the things you faced, sir?
absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for taking time out to take an interview of me. It's an absolute pleasure that a college as special as Vivekananda is interviewing me, because when you're talking about early stage, what I am able to recollect not just of my career but also of my earlier stage as a student. 2004 to 7 was when I did my BCom, and it is the very same college that I had applied at that point in time. Of course, I did not fall within the parameters that was required for a day college to be selected. And God has been very kind that, the very same college has a professor who's been taking me as an inspiration, who's been my student, and is equally now the head of the department coming and taking an interview of me. So thank you so much for that. On the career part, uh, CS has always been something that I've been very passionate about. One thing that I realized was I was not cut out for CA, and I was good in theory. So I said, okay, let us look at company secretary as an option. And we are talking about the pre-2013 Companies Act era. So 1956 Act, which has been there for almost 56, 60 odd years. And people have been experts in this for 60 long years. And it is in that era that I jump into. And yet, it was the most inspiring times because the entire landscape was slowly changing in across the corporates. 2008, you had the recession. 2010, I started my career. So 2010 to 2013 was a very interesting period where the corporate world was transitioning into a more governance oriented, transparency oriented situation. So I personally was able to enjoy, because I had again, God has been very kind to me, that He had given me an opportunity to sit as a company secretary at the age of 22.
That's great.
And of a listed company, 100 crore turnover listed company, directly reporting to the managing director. So when you sit as a company secretary at that young age, the amount of responsibility that you shoulder on yourself is quite tremendous, because we're talking about a board which had an ex-managing director of Indian Bank as the chairman, who was an independent director. You had a ex-retired IS officer who was an independent director. You had an average experience of the board which was 60 plus in age, and there I was a 22-year-old boy advising them on what corporate governance is. So you can imagine the difficulty, yet the challenges that I'd faced, which I enjoyed personally as a professional, because we are groomed by our institute, by the curriculum. We are given that confidence because we have that ACS behind our name, which gives us the pride and the confidence to face, because the knowledge is there. All we have to do is the experience part of it. So 2010 to 2013 has been a very, very interesting period for me.
Great. Sir, out of curiosity, I'm asking, what makes you to take this as a challenge? Because right before you at that time, there is opportunity.
Yes.
And not everyone will be ready to take up that challenge. So what make you to decide to jump into law, especially?
Yes. See, we're talking about 2004 to 2007 when I was a student. Now, 2004 period, 2000 to 2008 period, this IT has been a very, very lucrative business. I mean, a lucrative career, where you had right, left, and center engineers coming out, people going outside India I had 7 attais. So you can imagine the peer pressure of most of them doing engineering and going outside India. I'm a very pro-nationalist person. Career should I choose that will allow me to stay in India? I said, okay, now let's look at law. Now, law was a 5-year career, bachelor's degree. That was too long for me. So I did BCom. At the same time, I also decided to do company secretaryship, where I knew that when I do CS, I will happily stay in India. And when I am in India, I will happily serve my mother nation. So that was the sole reason why I chose CS as a career.
It's really an inspiration. Again, I want to ask about another question regarding why specifically you entered into practicer, because after completing CS, again we have an option to go for an employment or to practice. So what was the instigating point to decide towards practice?
Yes, it's a very interesting question. Well, I've been addressing students also for quite some time. For almost 14 years, I've been addressing the students from the age of 23. And I always tell them that when you are looking at a career, you should always have a 5-year, 10-year and a 20-year plan. Could sound ridiculous. So what do I know where the world will be 20 years down the lane? We'll come to that a little later as to how the world will move every 20 years once. But when I started my career as a company secretary, I was very clear. 5 years I'll be in the industry. Understand that side of it. And during the course of 5 years, I also realized that there is a lot of potential, because in 2013, I started my career in 2010. So 2010 to 13 was the 1956 era of Companies Act. 2014, the new act came. Company secretaries had a leap in terms of the opportunities. There was tremendous opportunities that we got. And I've seen 5 years of corporate, and within 5 years, I changed 3 corporates. And in 2015, I was in an IT company, and I knew I was rising up the ladder quite fast. So when I was climbing up the ladder, I realized my salary was also going up. And practice, initial period of practice is never easy. You know, it has its own difficulties. From X amount of salary, you're coming down to potentially zero. So from zero, how are you able to climb up the path is what determines your success. So when you're falling down in terms of your career, because practice is essentially zero, I decided that because I'm raising up faster, let me fall quicker. So that was my decision-making reasoning, was my growth in career.
So you're ready to take that risk and to face the challenge for your career growth.
Yes.
So it's absolutely very required for students also to understand, because they can also decide. This information definitely will be useful, sir.
Thank you.
So coming to the next part, what was the scope of practice?
Wow.
Because you're into practice, you will be the right person to talk about what is the scope of a company secretary.
Yes.
Under the things, kindly share.
Most certainly. So when I said, I said 5-year, 10-year, 20-year planning, one has to always understand the past to understand the future. So you look back a little on the past. Every 20 or 25 plus years of history of the world, there's always been some change that has happened. Let's take a quick recent past. Now, in 2000 era, it was the IT boom. 20 years down the lane, now it is not IT boom, it is IT AI boom. So you have artificial intelligence, the fast learning, that is booming. You take a little behind that, 1980 to 2000, there's been an industrial boom. So like this, every 20 years, the landscapes are changing. Now, when I was lucky enough that I got into my career when the landscape was changing in terms of the corporate governance. So 2014 Act came into play. Company secretaries became key managerial personals, which means we were treated at par with CEOs, with managing directors, with chief financial officers. The law was recognizing this. So it was a tremendous opportunity for company secretaries. And then once in practice, the opportunity started expanding exponentially. You had secretarial audits, which became mandatory for listed companies. You had a lot of corporate governance certificates that became mandatory. And then again, move it a little, 2016 and 17, You had National Company Law Tribunal that came up, and you had Insolvency Bankruptcy Code that came up. So you see, every 4 to 5 years, there is a small change. And then now we are talking about 2024. So 2024, what is the landscape that is changing? Is a huge era that is going to come up. Now, what is that era? We are talking about an era of ESG, an era of CSR impact assessment, an era of social stock exchange. The opportunities somewhere, if I have to define my career path, I initially I was rowing a boat in a small lake. I moved myself into practice, got into a river called NCLT and IBC. And from IBC, now I am slowly rowing my boat into an ocean called ESG, CSR Impact Assessment and Social Stock Exchange. So I'm able to visibly see my path travel from one extent to the another. Sir, ocean kapro, is there anything more? Well, if you had asked me when I was rowing in a lake, would I have ever had the guts to go to a river? My answer would have been a no. But that ability to understand how the landscape changes is what practice is all about.
Sir, you touched upon social stock exchange and CSR. Now, I want you to share a few things about CSR and then social stock exchange. When it comes to CSR, in Companies Act 2013, it was mandated.
Yes.
The Section 135. But how CSR have been taken up by the companies in your observation? Can you share a few things about it?
Most certainly. So when you look at CSR, India is the only country in the world where it is mandatory. Of course, we all know that. But that's a very interesting question that you're asking in terms of how did the industry accept it? See, anything that you put it as mandatory, there is going to be certain resistance that is going to be there. Of course, we have governments which are smart enough to not force anything down your throat day one. So what they did was, initially they said corporate social responsibility, you comply or you just report that you've not been able to comply. So they were very lenient in the initial 2-3 years. Then they slowly said, you comply, else you park that money into a separate account. And now they're going into a mode where you comply, else I will penalize you. So over a period of 10 years, so you said 2015 the law came up. So 2014 the law came up. We are in 2024. So the law has seen 10 years of transit. So 10th year, now they're saying, don't just spend. When you're spending, I want you to make an impact in the society and I want you to report back as to what your impact is. So I could just spend a few thousand crores. How do I know what has it impacted the society? You're 10 years of a background. It's high time that you start assessing the impact that it is making. So now they've made it mandatory for top 1,000 listed entities that you will have to start reporting on your impact assessment. A CSR impact assessment report. Who does it? Professionals like us. Company secretaries like us. So there is a huge opportunity there. And when you said how do corporates accept it, I was just going through a quick numbers in terms of what is the CSR spend. 15,000 crores. Unimaginable amount of money that is being pumped in. See, as a culture, as a dharma, we have always, Bharat and India has always been into responsibility. Social responsibility for every individual has always been part of our culture. But to corporatize it and to see to that it is making an impact on the ground and to make an impact assessment is becoming a huge impact in terms of the society. Imagine 15,000 crores annually being spent to elevate people. It's huge.
Right. So next, moving on to social stock exchange, because I'm curious to know what's the difference. We will start from basic. What's the difference between a normal stock exchange with a social stock exchange?
Yes.
Why is it required, sir?
Very good question. Social stock exchange, again, is going to be the next big thing in a professional field and in a corporate field. Now, I'm sure most of you understand how a regular stock exchange works. A regular stock exchange is where you have a company which has a requirement of funds for its growth, and therefore they go to the stock exchange, which is a platform. You have people with money on this side, and on the other side, you have corporates which is in requirement of money. There is a stock exchange which is a platform. It gives the money, it gets the money to the corporate from individuals, and the individual gains as the corporate keeps growing in terms of the value of the shares, and he can sell it to an outsider and he can make money out of it. This is how a regular stock exchange works. We all understand this very well. Of course, BCom, we are commerce students, we are looking at professional career. So these are very basic things that we understand. Now, social stock exchange, Abdina, is it profitable? Am I going to invest? Is it shares? Can I sell the shares? These are basic questions that will come up in everybody's mind. Well, let me give you a little background and then get into this subject. Now, in India, we all make donations to whatever governance reports you have. So many transparency reporting every quarterly. They'll have to report what is their profitability, what is their balance sheet, etc. So, which means the accountability on a corporate when it comes to money being invested on them is huge. The government felt NGOs, trusts are also equally getting good money. But what is the accountability there? Are they accountable? Of course, there are trusts, NGOs which are accountable, but is there a structure to it? The answer to that was a no. And unfortunately, there were quite a bit of NGOs and trusts that were being misused for certain anti-national activities. So, in order to curb all these things, they decided that they have to bring certain transparency into the whole picture. Now, how do you bring transparency? I explained to you how CSR came into the picture. They initially said spend, or you could just report saying that you've not been able to spend. Very similarly, they've started testing the social stock exchange platform. Now, let's look at what this platform is. It's a platform where on one side you have the trust, the NGOs, the foundations, etc. On the other side, you have individuals who are ready to donate. So when you are donating, do you get shares? No. You get something called ZCZP bonds, which is zero coupon, zero principal bonds. Now, when you give these bonds, it is nothing but a receipt that is in your hand where the trust which is taking your donation is accountable to you in terms of certain disclosures. So you know that the donation that you have made is going for the right purpose and it is being utilized for that purpose, and there is a reporting mechanism. Now, this is what is a social stock exchange.
Great. Now, what is the role of a company secretary in connection with social stock exchange?
Excellent. Now, anywhere there is a disclosure, anywhere there is any platform in terms of money that is being coming in, there will always be a role for a professional and especially a company secretary. Now, there are two things that I could immediately think about when it comes to a company secretary playing a role. One legally, one as an overall scope. Legally speaking, now you know for a fact that listed companies mandatorily have to have a full-time, whole-time company secretary who has to be there in the employment. Now, when it comes to social stock exchange, registered trust or NGOs or foundations, they may not have a requirement as such to have a full-time company secretary. So in such a case, it is practicing company secretaries who will act as a company secretary for the entity, for the trust, for the stock exchange, for the foundations, and they will do the entire disclosures in terms of the reporting, etc., to the stock exchanges and the reporting authorities. And the company secretary will also play a very important role in terms of the registration of the trust into the social stock exchange platform. They will also play a very important role in terms of how the fundraising happens. Fundraising here, we are talking about donations that are being raised. So you need to be very careful in terms of what are the documents that you're giving, whether it is true documents that are being laid before the public who are going to donate into the organization. All that is verified by a professional company secretary. So there are two scopes to it. One is the mandatory scope of there being a practicing company secretary who will play a role in terms of the disclosures. Two, being the overall scope in terms of your accountability in terms of the documents that are being produced.
Great, sir. So, in terms of again, I'm having a query. I need to ask. For example, a profit-making company, and they are willing to do some welfare activities. Are they eligible to get into social stock exchange?
See, social stock exchange is a very new platform that's come up. How many companies have registered? There are two steps to a social stock exchange. One is registration, another one is listing. Now, when you're talking about listing, that is where you have the fundraising activity of ZZP bonds and donations that are being coming into the picture. Now, when it comes to registration, you're just getting yourself registered so that you could make certain disclosures, etc., etc. Now, you have around approximately, if I remember, 35 to 37 company trusts that are registered. There's only one trust, that is trust or foundation, I'm not sure, but whichever be the case, there's only one NPO, non-profit organization, that is listed itself. That is Unnati. So when you're talking about registration, you're talking about a trust with certain eligibility criteria that are being established by them. Now, can a corporate which is already having a trust get itself listed in social stock exchange or registered in social stock exchange? If it falls within the criteria that have been established, the answer to that is a yes. Today, let's just change this question a little more, tweak it and say, are corporate social responsibility expenses eligible to pay for a social stock exchange registered company? Today, the answer to that is a no, unfortunately, but the government is very keen. And they are looking at, from what we understand, they are looking at modifying the entire regulations to make it more as wide as possible. What we are able to visualize is, over a period of time, again the 5 years, the 7 years, the 10-year period gap, they'll make it mandatory for every NGO, foundation or a trust to get itself registered in a social stock exchange to receive CSR. That could be the path that they are going into, because that has been the path that they did with CSR. So very similarly, they'll do that.
Great. So now we are going to get into their business straight away.
Yes.
What are the modern day challenges that the young budding professionals are going to face in the near future?
Yes. See, there are multiple challenges that a young budding professional or a graduate would face on a day-to-day basis. One, finding the right path. That's a very, very important aspect of a career. Finding the right path, you should know, as I told you, every 20 years the path goes. You should know which 20 years, what is the future that is going to be there. Now, for example, in the 1970s and 80s, when our fathers and grandfathers were into their careers, BCom and accounting entry was a very big thing. Apala physical entry of books. Now, slowly towards the 80s and the 90s, they had to force themselves into the system era. So, which means system terinjata, you will be placed. So then came the 2000s and the 2010s, where just knowing the system was not enough. You had to understand certain softwares like a Tally or a Zoho or a QuickBooks. Now, over a period of time, you will also be expected to know maybe artificial intelligence in terms of the accounting. Maybe what is the future path? Now, for example, when I said CSR impact assessment or a social stock exchange or a ESG, now that's a very, very huge area of practice that will be there for the next 20 years that we are talking about. You should get yourself equipped and you should have the skills to use all these AIs and AI related tools, and you should be an expert in that for you to start working. There is a question that is normally asked. Do we expect AIs to replace jobs? The answer to that is an absolute no. But the question is, will people who know to use AI replace people who don't know to use AI? The answer to that is an absolute yes. So you should equip yourself to such that you have the ability to use AI and you have the skills to put it forth to your organization.
Great.
This is the challenge that a student who is starting his career is going to be facing in the near future.
Sir, in the beginning, you highlighted the boom of AI. And now you also correlated how students have to cope up with AI. Having said that, what is the kind of exposure students may get into profession, as well as how it is possible for them to catch up with the trend?
Yes. See, it's a very interesting question. How do students catch up with the trend? See, as a professional, we deal with corporates, we deal with a lot of commerce bodies where they go and make certain presentations to the governments, to the statutory bodies and bring certain changes. And whenever there is any change, we start looking at it, etc., etc. So this is from a company secretary's perspective because that's part of our career. How do students look at it? See, today's era is unlike the 2000s era where அப்போ வந்து knowledge or subject content was very low that we could search for. We had to go out of our way, reach out to people in person. இதெல்லாம் social media era க்கு முன். So reach out to people, understand from them. They will not give their time. They'll be busy. அது மீறியும் we used to try to understand what are the trends. But now, you don't have to go anywhere. It's there at your palm. But the reverse of it is too much of information is there. Now, what is the right information is where you have to start tracking the trend. So, adukku you should start tracking the right websites, the right channels. Try to see whether what they've already predicted has already been in vogue. If it has been in vogue, then you could start looking and exploring at that channel whether they will be able to guide you in terms of the trends. And there are multiple articles that are there. You have Ministry of Corporate Affairs website. You have Chamber of Commerce across industries, which give you a lot of inputs. And I'm sure as a college, something like Vivekananda College invites a lot of professionals, invite a lot of industry experts to come and give their speech. You always do it. I know it. I've been lucky enough to be invited by you and your college. So that is where the input comes in for the student to start tracking. Now, for example, I still recollect maybe 6 months back, I came to your college and spoke on sustainability, a topic that was maybe new at that point in time, maybe not in the daily conversation of a student. But I still interestingly remember there was a student who got up and asked, how do I build a career on sustainability? That's a trigger. I said, there is one curriculum which you will focus on, which will have your accounting, your commerce, your banking, etc., etc. That is the base, foundation. Without that, you can never go up. So that foundation, once you are done, that is when you start exploring the sustainabilities and other areas of interest. And there are so many online classes and online certification courses that give you a clarity as to what is the path that you could tread. So that has to be tracked by the student, and they have to look at the past to see whether the tracking is right. That's a very important aspect.
I hope I took more time. I asked so many questions. Now I want you to share some concluding remarks and to bless our students. Can you share a few insights?
Most certainly. Once again, thank you so much for the opportunity to interact with the students of a college which I've always aspired to be a student of, and been unlucky that I've not been able to equip myself to be a student there. And what is more important is, whenever you face certain stumbling blocks, the path doesn't stop there. That is what I have understood. See, today you look at me as a professional who got his qualification at the age of 22, who was sitting as a company secretary at the age of 22. But you look at a little behind, a little at the past, I was dyslexic. Nobody would today believe that I was dyslexic. I've gone through failures in my life at a very young age. I've gone through private tutorials when I was in my 10th standard because I couldn't clear my exams when I was in my 7th standard. I could have easily fumbled, but I had my own support systems which helped me. And the biggest support system has always been God, who's been very kind to me with all the challenges that He gave me. Every challenge that He gives you, there are two choices that you have. One, to stop yourself at that moment, or two, to see how you can use that as a stepping stone for your success. God has been kind enough to me that He's given me the strength to look at every challenge in my life as an opportunity. And I would also highly recommend that you start exploring and reading a lot more books, because that is a very, very important aspect that is being not done in today's era. Book படிக்க ஆரம்பிச்சோனாலே knowledge and the right knowledge will start coming in. Of course, we can start seeing reels, we can see Instagram pages, we can follow them. All that is there. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not the kind of person who's going to say don't do it. Do that. But always have certain goals in your life, and every day move towards your goals such that you don't feel or regret of what you've done in the past. This would be my advice to each one of you. Have a goal, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year path. It may sound ridiculous when you start with, but that is what will take you up the ladder wherever you are in your career path. Wishing you all the best to each one of your students, and to your wonderful professor here. Once again, a very, very, very heartfelt thank you to him.
Definitely, this session will make a significant impact in the minds of the students. I hope so. It will. Thank you so much, sir.